Last night we had some news. The President of the United States of America said, hey, guys, everybody's going to receive $2,000 from tariff revenue collected by the Trump administration. The last time we did $2,000 checks, it didn't work out so well for the economy a couple years later because inflation kind of destroyed everything. He wants to pay down debt with all these tariffs, and he also wants to give every American $2,000, which, by the way, would cost something like $1.3 trillion, which is a lot of money. There's a pretty significant problem with the idea of $2,000 checks based off of tariff revenue, and we will get there very shortly. But first, Liberation Day, April 2nd, the president declared a national emergency invoking a very specific power granted to the president in 1977 called IEEPA, or the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. And he used this to impose 10% tariffs on every country all over the world and so-called reciprocal tariffs on some countries that already had tariffs on the United States. Donald Trump uses somewhat of a, something that has been being used by a lot more presidents recently in much more creative ways. But Donald Trump has sort of taken this power and has sort of stretched it sort of to its max. And now there's maybe some repercussions for this. These are the tariffs all over the world. Some countries got more, some countries got less, but everybody got 10%. As you can see, India got a lot. India specifically because Donald Trump wants to try and stop their trading with Russia. China also has like 150% tariff sometimes. So far, the administration has collected about $100 billion extra in tariffs. Last year we collected $79 billion. This year we collected $174 billion. So about $100 billion extra in tariffs. How he's going to pay $1.3 trillion in tariff money to Americans when he's only collected about 10% of the amount needed in the first 10 months, I don't know. How he's going to pay off the debt, I don't know. He has sort of claimed this power, and now we're starting to see the assertion of this power being tested. A panel of judges at the USICT, this is the International Court of Trade, has ruled that Donald Trump's use of IEEPA tariffs, they were illegal. And this was upheld by the U.S. Court of Appeals. And so what has ultimately happened is a Supreme Court case. A company called Learning Resources and Hand to Mind are suing the government because they too believe that the assertion of IEEPA powers to implement tariffs is illegal. Learning Resources is a company. It is a family-owned business that designs and distributes educational products for children. Some assembly does occur domestically, but the manufacturing is outsourced to international partners, including China. Beginning in early 2025, a series of executive orders from Donald Trump invoking the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEEPA, imposed unprecedented tariffs on imports, including goods from China. This included a 20% trafficking tariff and additional reciprocal tariffs that pushed rates on Chinese goods to over 145%. The petitioners, Learning Resources and Hand to Mind, were directly affected. And so they are challenging that they do not authorize the president to impose tariffs and finding that tariffs pose an existential threat to petitioners. So basically, this company is losing money because the president has used powers that he does not legally have. So this company, Learning Resources, kind of a random company, is challenging the president's authority to exercise tariffs, and that is sitting before the Supreme Court. So let's look at the government's argument. The government asserts that, and this is the for case, this is the pro. Yes, Donald Trump does have the authority to implement these tariffs. Very specific wording in IEEPA. So this is the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. And this is Section 203. At the times and to the extent specified in Section 202, the President may, under such regulations as he may prescribe by means of instructions, licenses, or otherwise, investigate, regulate, or prohibit any transactions in foreign exchange. That's the important bit. And so this is sort of a novel reading of this word in particular. The government is asserting that this word, regulate, if you go back sort of in history, this obviously means that the president is allowed to use tariffs in order to regulate trade. And this is essentially their strongest argument. It does not seem all that readily apparent that that is indeed what that means, especially considering that there is no modern precedent for using regulate to mean tariffs. You would have to go back to the predecessory legislation of this, which was TWIA, which is the Trading with Enemies Act, in order to find a president that used that to mean tariffs. The president is sort of saying, we're going to give $2,000 to every American because of all the money that we raised with the tariffs. But the dude that's arguing the case before the Supreme Court is saying, no, these are not these tariffs that we're implementing, their purpose is not to raise revenue. Their purpose is to regulate, because they have to use this very specific language in order to even get the authority to do this. The other thing that's being ignored is that 3 years before the implementation of IEEPA, you have the Trade Act of 1974. They gave the president in Section 122, they gave the president the ability to implement tariffs for specifically trade imbalances, which is the exact thing that Trump is arguing is a problem. Section 122 of the Trade Act of 1974, it authorizes quotas and tariffs of as much as 15% for 150 days against one or more countries that have large and serious balance of payment surpluses with the United States. He can do 15% tariff up to 150 days. The problem is he doesn't want to do a 15% tariff, and he doesn't want a 150-day limit. What he wants is unlimited authority to do basically whatever he wants. And this is very clear because that's exactly what they're saying in court. They're saying that this word, regulate, means you can have an infinite percentage of tariffs for an infinite amount of time, which, at least in my reading, it clearly does not mean that. And so one of the big reasons why they're fighting this so hard is because if this does get overturned, if the Supreme Court does decide, hey, these tariffs are illegal, and something that the president's lawyers have said is, yeah, if they're illegal, then we'll just repay everybody. We'll just pay all the companies back all the tariffs that we collected. And so the extra, $100 billion, the extra $100 billion in tariffs that have been collected, they're all going to have to get refunded if the Supreme Court rules that actually, yeah, the president is not allowed to use IEEPA powers in this way. So basically, the government is arguing that one word in one statute in a bill passed 50 years ago is enough to allow the president basically free reign to do whatever he wants with tariffs. He can set them as high as he wants for as long as he wants. We will see. I'm very, very curious to see how the Supreme Court rules and what their actual pronouncement for this is.